Hello, beautiful people. In today's episode, I speak to Eddy Quan, and Eddy runs the Twitter account War on Weakness, probably my favorite Twitter handle in the whole Twitterverse. But Eddy writes about writing and mindset and self-development, and in this episode, we spoke about all of those things. We spoke about confidence and self-love and what to do with a dopamine addiction. Overall, incredible conversation. Eddy's a great dude. So fortunate to have spoken to him and super grateful for our conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know on Twitter at HeyDannyMiranda. That's the best place to give me feedback on this episode. And I look forward to hearing from you. I hope you guys enjoy my conversation with Eddy Quan.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
Tell everyone who's not familiar with you just a little bit about yourself.
All right, cool. So as I said, I have a weird background. I was born in Malaysia. Grew up. I lived there till I was 7, and most people don't know this about me, but my first language was actually Mandarin. But because I left Malaysia when I was at such a young age, my mother got remarried. We moved to a country called Papua New Guinea. Now, I doubt your listeners know anything about Papua New Guinea, but it's a very poor, very underdeveloped country. We were there because my stepfather worked in the mining industry. And I went to an international school there, so I grew up with kids from all over the world. So most of my friends back then were either Canadian or American, or Aussie and Kiwi. So it was a very international environment. Then we went to Australia, and that's where I spent basically the second half of my life. So high school, university, and I worked in Australia in the finance industry for like about 6-7 years. And I basically just went traveling for a year. And now I am based in Colombia, where I've been for like the last 9 or 10 years. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a very, traveler / adventurous spirit because of my upbringing. So I'm at a point now where I've been in Colombia for so long, I feel I need to live in a different country.
Yeah, and it's how I got to know you was through your writing on Twitter. And
yes.
And so you didn't touch on that just now, so I'm very curious about how writing online became a part of your life.
Great question. I'm a bit of an introverted soul. So I've always been into books. I've always been into ideas. And I got on Twitter because it's the only social media platform that I think is somewhat interesting. Because I think what's cool, and you touched on this at the beginning, how you can read someone's tweets and over a few months, like you feel like you know that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting how you can read someone's tweets and sense their energy. Like I can tell just by reading your tweets and speaking to you that we're going to get along, even though I don't actually know you, if that makes sense. And I think that's really cool. I could probably say that about at least 10 different accounts who I've never actually spoken to, not even in the DMs. And I know I'm going to get along with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always fascinated by that aspect of Twitter. I used to be a passive consumer, so I've been on Twitter for many years, but I just never tweeted. I just read tweets, or I used it to follow up on particular topics. But last year, I connected with Lawrence King, and he basically just convinced me to start growing my account. He was like, now's the time to start sharing your ideas with the world. You can grow a pretty big audience just by sharing your ideas. And that's how it started, dude. I just started writing tweets. I made a challenge for myself at the beginning to write 5 to 10 tweets every day, and that became like a daily, just like a mental exercise for me. And once I got a few thousand followers, I was like, well, I'm going to go all in on this.
It's so fascinating to hear about so many people talking the same way about starting. And I love this. I love that you just said that about how when you started on Twitter, your goal wasn't X amount of followers, or maybe you wanted X amount of followers, but maybe, but instead of saying, I'm going to focus on an external, you instead focused on something you could directly control, 5 to 10 tweets a day. And it's so fascinating because it's just something that anyone can apply to any area, right? Whatever area you're trying to improve, focus on the internal as opposed to the external.
Yeah, man. And I think that line of thinking about the 5 to 10 tweets I got that personally from Scott Adams. I think we've talked about his book before, right?
It's possible.
So he has a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. I think that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And he's got a lot of ideas in it. But the most powerful idea I learned from that book was the idea of forgetting your goals and just focusing on the process. Mm-hmm. So if you write 5-10 tweets a day, I mean, that sounds like it's not that hard, right? But once you actually do it, you realize it's actually kind of hard unless you're a really brilliant writer, because to be able to condense your thoughts within a 280 character limit is not as easy as it sounds. And if you do that every day, it's kind of like trying to max out your creative muscles every day. Similar to lifting weights, right? And I think, like you said, breaking it down from internal versus external, I think of it as systems versus goals. So if you just put all your focus on improving the system, the goals will naturally get met, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And so talk to me about what you were doing when you decided, okay, Lawrence King says I should grow on Twitter. I think I'm going to start. What is your mindset like? What are you trying to do, and what has changed from then to now?
Okay, I can tell you what's changed. So at the very beginning, I didn't really have a specific goal. I knew I wanted to have an online presence because I knew that the internet was the future. But because I'm introverted, I don't really like to be out there too much. This is why I don't take selfies, and I don't really post on Instagram or Facebook. But like I said, Twitter is different because you can connect with people through their ideas, which I thought was very powerful. So my initial goal with it was just to grow it was just to have an online presence and then eventually monetize in the future. But what I've noticed after spending about 3 to 6 months on the platform is the real benefit of Twitter is expanding your network. Mm-hmm. And meeting people. Like I've met at least 10, connected with at least 10, 15 people who I would genuinely call my friend, and people who I would meet in real life and hang out with, even more so than my real life friends. Because the cool thing about Twitter, like I said, because you connect with someone through their ideas, you can be very, very honest with people, especially in the DMs. Mm-hmm. Which I think is really refreshing because, the way we meet people in real life, it's very different. Most of the people we meet in real life are through our immediate environmental circumstances. So whether that's because you're trapped in the same office together, or you're trapped in the same college or university together. And that's how most people meet people. Whereas on Twitter, you can put out your ideas and you can express how you think about the world, and you naturally attract people who think just like you, which is unbelievable.
It really is like a form of mind reading. It's a
Yeah,
form of, like you've read my mind so many times. And
exactly.
and it's like when you have a friendship, you know, in school or you have a friendship in university or work, you're not reading that person's mind all the time. You're just talking to them, and the only way you're getting their perspective is if you talk to them. And so with Twitter, it's different because you get an insight into their mind, and it's so
Yes.
fascinating, And so, yeah, we're on the 100% same page with that because Twitter has given me such incredible friendships, an incredible network of people I can turn to for advice, and it's really so true.
Yeah, I particularly like. I mean, we're always talking about. I like the energy on Twitter, especially our little corner of, you know, whether you want to call it self improvement or money Twitter or whatever. Um, I like that you can just kind of like be positive and not get any pushback. Like I feel in real life. I mean, when you spend too much time on Twitter, the ideas that get shared of self improvement, etc., they seem very normal, but in real life, they're very, very abnormal. Like we live in a very, very tiny bubble on Twitter, and I think that's something special that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, so the thing is about the bubble, right? It's like a lot of times we have bubbles where we create negativity, not on Twitter, but just in general. It's so easy to create
Yes.
negativity and complain. And so if your norm is to be positive and to look at the bright side of things and to figure out how you can tackle the next challenge, it gives you an inherent advantage in whatever you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I have to stress this again. Like it's really, really, really rare to be able to like have a group of people you can go to and talk about your goals, talk about the challenges you're facing, talk about um, all the extra things you're doing to improve your life, and not get and have that support reflected back to you. That's really, really rare. Um, and the more I feel that the more time I spend on Twitter, the more I feel I'm removed from regular life, which I still haven't decided yet whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Um, I'm definitely not in the camp of people who are like, well, just completely abandon everyone in your regular life. I'm definitely not in that camp. I do try and keep my tribe pretty small, but at the same time, like I'm like everyone else, right? I still have friends from who I went to school with, who I went to uni with, and we catch up. But but yeah, the more time you spend on Twitter, I don't know. It feels like you're removed. You feel a lot more removed, a lot more distant from like regular society. I don't know if you get that feeling.
Yeah, I think that it's very easy. I think it's very easy to get lost in that. And that happened to me actually in 2018. I started posting my thoughts and I got lost towards the end of my time on Twitter at the end of 2018 where I was just saying things that I look back on and I was like, I would never think those things today. But I got lost in a bubble that I was in.
Yep.
And I think it's very dangerous and you don't even know it's coming because you're so in that bubble. But it's only after reflecting back on it where I could say, wow, I would never say that today. Like I'm not proud of what some of the things that I tweeted. And
Yeah.
I think that's important to just have that period of reflection. And now I'm grateful to have a meditation practice where I don't know how I managed to be on Twitter without having a meditation practice because you get so much thrown at you and you need a way to go to and
Yeah.
filter it. And meditation for me is just that way to filter and get back to inbox zero almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. I had this year actually, like I would say 2 or 3 months ago, I had a minor Twitter burnout where, like, as you said, like I was just spending way too much time on the platform, and I didn't really know where my mind was. It was hard to describe, but I just needed to take a break, and I took an extensive break. I mean, I was writing tweets, but I wasn't checking my DMs. I wasn't responding to anybody. I was just like, yeah, I'll write my tweets, but I'm not going to spend too much time on the platform because when you're on Twitter all day long, holy crap, it's like taking steroids for your mind.
It's draining, man. It's super
Yeah.
draining.
Yeah, I mean, you think, oh, it's just a social media app. You just log on and look at some words. No, like it really it's stimulus for your mind if you think about it,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, it's like having I don't know, if you have an office job that's mentally stimulating, whether you're, I don't know, if you're an accountant, you're looking at Excel spreadsheets all day long, or you're a coder, you're looking at coding all day long. Like that stuff that's draining your mental energy, and Twitter does that too. It strains your mental energy.
Absolutely. So you mentioned goals previously. I'm super curious.
Yes.
What are some of your goals right now?
Dude, so at the beginning of the year, my goal was to I had a very, very arbitrary goal of earning a certain amount of money online. And I also wanted to, I mean, nothing special, right? I wanted to lose a little bit of weight. But the main thing was I wanted to leave this country. Unfortunately, I don't know how that's going to play out now with the COVID, because when I set those goals, COVID was not a risk. So I'm in a weird place right now, dude, where I was supposed to go back to Australia, but the COVID restrictions there are pretty strict, which is making it troublesome for me to go back home. So yeah, I'm in a place right now where I'm just trying to survive and stay in Colombia and trying to figure out which country I want to move to next. I think it's either gonna be somewhere within this region, whether it's Central or South America, or if the borders open up again and the COVID regulations aren't a complete pain in the ass, I can go back to Australia.
Any interest in the United States?
I don't think, oh man, I don't think I would live in the United States. I really love going there for like trips and stuff, but I don't know where I would live. Like I feel assuming money's not an issue and visas aren't an issue or anything, I'd probably live somewhere that's not well known. It'd probably be like a smaller city. Like I've heard Boise, Idaho is a really cool city.
That's so random.
Yeah, I know, it's strange, right? I saw photographs of it. It looks kind of cool. I'm done with big cities. I'll tell you that much. Like I live in for people that don't know, I live in the capital of Colombia, which is Bogota, and Bogota is like New York City. It's a very, very large city. It's extremely intense. The energy is very, very tough. So it's a tough place to live. But at the same time, I feel I'm not ready to live in a small town yet. So the compromise I'm thinking is like a small city, something like 1 to 3 million people.
Interesting. It's interesting how you came to that conclusion. So you've mentioned energy a few times, and talk to me about that.
Energy.
Yeah, talk to me about energy in general.
So one of the biggest lessons I've learned this year, Danny, is about energy management. So when I first got into the whole self-improvement thing, it always came down to two resources, right? Time and money, right? Which are two very, very valuable resources. But a lot of people miss the point, which is that your energy is really the main thing you should be managing. So there's different energy. Sounds like a very, very airy fairy word, but really it breaks down to a couple of things. So you've got your physical energy. So obviously, if you're not eating right and you're not doing some sort of exercise, you're just not going to have that physical energy. Your sleep very, very important, right? If you're not sleeping well, you can't do your job well, right? Mental energy. So I'm a big proponent of mindset. So you've seen my tweets. I'm always talking about the importance of positive thinking, the importance of having affirmations to keep you aligned with your vision. Having a vision in the first place as well keeps your mental energy strong, and being very careful with what sort of media you consume, what type of people you spend your time with. For example, as an introvert, if I spend say a whole day speaking to people at a networking event, which is something I had to do a lot of when I had an office job, I had to go out and meet and greet with clients, and I would spend 3-4 hours at some function speaking to lots of different people. That drained my mental energy, right? So that's mental. And then this one's a weird one because a lot of people out there who are uncomfortable with the subject, but your spiritual energy. So whether you have a religion that you believe in, or what else would be considered spiritual energy? Meditation, as you said. If you those are the three main sources: physical, mental, and spiritual. And they're all connected. So if you're lacking mental energy, that might be something in your diet, right? Because if you have a shitty diet, then you're gonna be a lot more agitated. You're gonna be a lot more anxious. If you're not getting enough sleep, I mean, personally, I'm very, very moody when I don't have enough sleep. When I'm not eating right, I'm very, very moody as well. And it's also about understanding yourself, man. Like I said, I'm an introvert, so I find socializing, even though I enjoy it, I find that very, very draining, right? Whereas people who are extroverted, they recharge that way. So my girlfriend's like that. My girlfriend can speak all day. She can speak all day on the phone with her parents, with her cousins, and whatever. And she feels good about that, whereas that would just drain me. So it's about understanding yourself. I would say just being aware of your energy. That's step one. Like knowing which buttons to push to increase, or which things deplete your energy. That's very important.
So someone listening to this right now might be thinking to themselves, okay, I don't feel great, or I am not in a high energy state, right? So,
yep.
So your suggestion to them would be just to audit their life, to figure out where they can gain more energy from what you just talked about, mental, spiritual, and physical?
Yeah, you said the main word, Danny, which is audit. Now, I suspect, if you're listening to this podcast, then you have a higher level of self-awareness than most people. Okay? Because no, seriously, I mean that completely seriously, because most people don't even consider it an option to that the fact that they can go out there, do something tomorrow or today that improves their life in the future. Like that's just not even on most people's minds. So if you have the self-awareness to even be thinking about improving yourself, then you have the self-awareness to do a personal audit, like you said. Now, I always think before you even tap into mental and spiritual and emotional, that's another one, you always want to start with the physical. So when I first started turning my life around, it was like every other guy, right? It was literally getting my ass to the gym, fixing my diet. Okay? And that's mind-blowing for a lot of people who haven't done that before, because the first thing you notice when you start working out and you start dieting, once you get past that first couple of months of, oh man, this is tough, and you start feeling the benefits, you start feeling younger and stronger. that's when you start seeing the power of energy. Then usually the next phase is, well, okay, what can I do to increase my mental energy? And that's when people start discovering, mindset, affirmations, things like that. So yeah, like you said, personal audit, but always start with the physical, because if that's not addressed, then everything else is screwed.
I love that. I love that because without the physical, you're building a house on quicksand, right? And
Yes.
if you have the physical down pat, it'll give you more energy and it'll give you just a win, right? A win in your day where you're able to say, oh, I got that done. I went to the gym. And like I tell people who are just starting to work out, like focus on the internal, like we were talking about in the beginning with the tweets, right? Focus on going to the gym 3 times. Focus on hitting your macronutrient targets for the day. Don't focus on looking like your favorite supermodel or looking like, like focus on what you can control. Because if you start looking at yourself and comparing yourself to The Rock or something like that, like you're gonna be in a bad place. So I love what you just said about the importance of focusing on the physical first, because that really is the one thing that anyone can control. If you have just your body, do push-ups, right? Like you could do sit-ups, you could do air squats. Like you don't need fancy equipment. You just need to put in the work for a long enough time, 3 months, and if you're doing that consistently, you will see results. There's just no other way if you're doing that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, so you brought up a really funny thing I have to address. I've been working out pretty consistently now for like 5-6 years. But before that, I actually quit the gym on 3 separate occasions. And the reason why I quit on those 3 separate occasions is because, like you said, I made the mistake of focusing on the external.
Mm-hmm.
So my first attempt of going to the gym was when I was 18. And so, an 18-year-old Australian guy, what does he want? He wants girls. He wants a body and he wants girls. So that's all I thought about. I was like, all right, I need to get a 6-pack. I need to look amazing so I can go get the ladies. And while all of that was happening, now, being an 18-year-old kid, I had zero self-awareness. So I wasn't even paying attention to the fact that my energy is better, my health is better. I wasn't even thinking about those things. I was literally just focusing on, okay, how much weight am I lifting? How much muscle am I gaining? And because it didn't happen as fast as I wanted it to happen, I quit.
Yep.
And that happened on 3 separate occasions. And then when I turned 30, that's when I was like, you know what? I really need to sort my life out. And after like 6 months of going to the gym, I realized something. I realized that my mind is sharper. Like I'm happier. I'm less agitated. I'm less moody. When bad things happen to me, as they do in day-to-day life, I don't lose my shit. Like I'm a lot more calm. And I realized all of that came from the foundation I had built by starting to get my physical energy right. And then after doing that for 12 months, that's when I discovered mindset, and that was the next level.
Yeah, and what you just said relates directly to a quote or a tweet that you have that I love and I think about often is confidence is a side effect of doing hard shit every day. So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so one of the most useless advice. Am I allowed to swear on this, by the way?
Fuck yeah. Sorry, Grandma.
Okay, good. Oh, good. I just want to. When I get emotional, I tend to swear a lot.
Go for it.
One of the most fucking useless pieces of advice that I heard as a young man was just be confident. It's like, oh, you want girls? Just be confident, and that's really useful because there's no practicality to it. I'm a big proponent of mindset, but mindset is it's a weird one. People misunderstand mindset like they misunderstand reading. Like mindset's not just about repeating positive things and then just spending the rest of your day sitting around doing nothing. It's a kickstart, right? So the only way to get confidence is by taking risks. So you have to live the hero journey. So what's the hero journey? The hero journey is basically knowing that life is tough, that you're going to have challenges, but you're going to do it anyway. Okay? And once you start facing your challenges, once you start facing your demons, once you start confronting your problems, it sucks at the beginning, but once you overcome them, you realize that shit that you were worried about a day ago or last month was really not a big deal. Right? I'll give you a tiny example. When I first started working online, I had like some guy asked me, like, "Oh, what's your goal?" And I was like, "Well, it'd be pretty cool to make $100 a day." And I don't know why I came up with the number that appeared in my mind, because at that point I was making $0 a day. And now that I've had a few $100 days, it's like you realize, well, why was that even a problem? That wasn't even that challenging. Okay. Now I'm not trying to sound arrogant, like, oh, if you're new to online business, $100 is not a big deal. No, it's a big deal if you haven't made any money yet. My point is that your challenges get bigger, and as you start overcoming the challenge, whatever that may be, your confidence is just a natural side effect. It's just going to build and build and build.
Yeah, man.
So don't chase confidence. This goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Don't chase confidence. Chase improvement in your processes, and then the confidence will come. The goals, the rewards, they'll come. It's not a big deal.
I love what you said about looking at the challenge and doing it anyway, because I think that's what stopped me from going to the gym at first. That's what stopped me from putting myself out and writing my own blog and writing a newsletter and putting myself out there online. I knew how difficult it was going to be, the journey. But when I finally got the balls to be like, okay, I'm going to do it anyway, good things start to happen. Things start to fall into place. Yes, the challenge will be difficult, but if you can stare it down in its face and just be like, you know what, I'm going to do it, then you come out stronger on the other end. So yeah, I just relate to what you're saying.
That's another downside of being a goal-oriented person. And I know this because that's how I used to be before I discovered systems thinking. I used to only focus on the end goal.
Yep.
And Scott Adams addresses this in his book, where if all you think about is, I don't know, for example, if you're going to the gym and your goal is to get a six-pack, if all you think about is the six-pack, okay, and you're starting from a place where you have above 20% body fat, or above 25, some people even have 30% body fat, right? And you're looking at a photo of someone with a six-pack. I mean, that's an intimidating goal, right? You're going to reach a point after a couple of weeks where you keep thinking about that six-pack. You're going to feel like a loser every day.
Yep.
Whereas if you focus on the process, then you naturally start celebrating the little improvements, that extra rep, that extra weight, right? Those become the little goals that you should be celebrating, not the big goal at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is so true, because if you want to be something, you can just do it today, right? If you want to be a writer, just write 500 words today. If you want to be someone who lifts weights, just lift weights today. And if you do that long enough, you actually become the person you want to be. And so, yeah, it was a total mindset shift for me when I started looking at everything that way.
Yeah, I think the best advice I can give to the people out there is live your life as if you've already achieved the goal, and the universe will catch up to you. Like you should be if your goal is to be a successful writer, start writing. And eventually the universe will gift you with the audience and the readers that you thought about.
Yeah. You're listening to the number one podcast in the world. Time just hasn't caught up yet.
Exactly. There we go.
So, Eddy, talk to me a little bit about the Vault, because you have the Vault, and I produce something similar on my website for free, but you have this Vault where you put basically all your book notes and all your resources, and you just put it in one file. And so talk to me a little bit about your favorite resource in the Vault, and why it's your favorite.
My favorite book, you mean? Within it?
Yeah, for sure.
I would say I've got a lot in there, but the best one, the one that I personally use a lot, is my book notes on how to stop worrying and start living. So Dale Carnegie, who's a very well-known self-improvement writer, he's dead now, I think, but he's very famous for How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a fantastic book on social skills. But his best book, in my opinion, is one called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, which, if you are someone who struggles with, with anxiety and with overthinking, and me being an introvert, I used to struggle with that a lot, where I was just in my head all the time. That's the book that you want to read. In terms of the Vault, I started it because, so when I was in university, I was known as being the book notes guy. So I tell the story to everyone. When I used to line up, when you're like lining up to get into the exam room to do your midterms or whatever, right? I would look around and all the students would be reading my notes because one of my friends obviously just like copied it and well, I would give it to a couple of friends, a couple of people in my study group, but they obviously gave it to everyone, to one friend, and they give it to another friend, and eventually it would circulate around the entire class. And this went on for like 3 years. And so I always knew I did really thorough book notes. And it's a habit I've kept up with pretty much since I was like 21. Unfortunately, I had a huge batch which I lost because it's on a hard drive back in Australia. This is pre-cloud days, by the way. I'm a little bit old. But once I got on Twitter, I gave out a couple of notes. So I gave out my notes to Atomic Habits, and also one to a copywriting book called Cash Advertising, and I got phenomenal feedback for both of those notes. So I thought, well, I have like 20 or 30 books in my reservoir. I may as well publish it. And by making a paid product, it gives me an incentive to keep up with my reading practice.
Yeah, makes sense to me. And it's really cool to see someone else do that and someone else put their work online. And it's really fascinating because if you read, enough and you take notes enough, that database can almost become smarter than you. And what I mean by that is like, I've probably put 30 book notes on my website. I can't recall 30 book notes, for everything that I put up. And it's like, if I just go back to my website and refresh myself, I'll be like, oh, wow, I remember this, but I vaguely remember this. So it's just fascinating because at a certain point, the system becomes smarter than you.
Yeah, man. It's the human memory is really crap. Really crap. I don't think people realize this. I mean, like, if you just think, if you think about all the stuff that you supposedly learned in school, I mean, how much did you actually retain? Probably very little, right? Yeah, this is why I tell people now, like, don't be afraid to reread your favorite books for two reasons. A, which is what you just mentioned, which is that your memory sucks. And B, the benefit of reading a book isn't just the book, it's your personal experience combined with the lessons in the book. So there are a lot of books, powerful books I read when I wasn't ready to read them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually just writing about it this morning, so I may as well tell the story. When I was, I think I was like 16 or 17. That's when I first discovered that book, how to win friends and influence people. And at the time when I read it, a friend of mine basically forced me to read it. I read it and I was like, well, this is stupid. Like, who needs to read a book about social skills? You know, back then my social skills was getting drunk and just having a laugh with your friends. But then I read that book 10 years later in my late 20s, and I started to connect the dots because in my late 20s, I had an additional 10 years of social experience. So I could draw from that. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I was 18, like, I just wasn't thinking about my social skills.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's there's also one other factor that I love to point out to people is that I'm not necessarily reading the book for the information. Sometimes I'm reading the book for the author's energy. To touch on something we were talking about before, it's like an author, if they've achieved anything, they're probably pretty excited about what they have done, right? And if you can read a nonfiction book and feel the energy that the author is emitting, you are getting some of that success residue. And so I read a book often, not just for the information and not just for what the author is saying, but the way the author is saying it and the energy they give. That's
a really, really interesting insight. I never thought about it that way. The book that comes to mind when you mention that is this is probably one of my favorite autobiographies ever. It's called "Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman," by Richard Feynman. Have you read that one?
A few chapters into it.
Oh, dude, it's you can feel his energy, his curiosity as a scientist.
Yep.
Right off the bat, right? Like that book makes you excited about learning, about life. That's the beauty of that book. And yeah, Richard Feynman's energy definitely comes off in that book. That's a really interesting point. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, man. And it's the same thing as tweets, right? If you think you get the energy from a tweet, like someone who's a high energy person is going to put that high energy into the tweet. It's the same thing for a real physical book. And what's great is that you can verify the success of that person most times, right? When they're writing an actual book as opposed to just writing a tweet. Anyone can write a tweet. There's no cost of entry really other than having an email address. But when you have a real person where you could be like, oh, this is their Wikipedia page, this is what they did, and take that energy from them, it's really powerful, man.
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about biographies and autobiographies, as opposed to like, you know, a standard sort of how-to book about a specific skill or topic you're trying to learn more of. When you read an autobiography or a biography, you can sense the energy of that person and how he confronted his challenges in life, which is really cool. I never thought about it from an energy point of view, but that's really interesting you mentioned that. Yeah,
so kind of switching gears a little bit is you had a tweet one time that said, "My goal with this account is to help younger men avoid the mistakes I made. I'm in my mid-30s. When I was in my teens and early 20s, I got a lot of life-changing advice from older men. Now I get to do the same on Twitter, every day on Twitter, and it's a blessing." My question with this is, what mistakes did you make? And yeah, can you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger. I would say the biggest mistake I made was basically just drinking my life away when I was young. I mean, I did the same thing as every other kid. A lot of drinking, a lot of partying, like zero sense of my future. I mean, my reality back then was just, I thought going to university was the only option. And that if you didn't go to university, basically your life is fucked. Like that was the mentality that was instilled in me, because I went to a very, very academic school. So all of my friends were basically studied in the STEMs. So you can imagine the pressure, right? Basically, if you didn't get a degree in science or engineering or finance or something that's prestigious, you were basically a loser. So I would say one of my mistakes was partying too much, not even thinking about the future, and just basically being a drifter. That was the big thing. Being a drifter versus living my life intentionally. And I was very lucky. So when I was about 23, 24, I had already got a professional job. I was making good money. I met an older man who had a similar career path. He was 38 at the time. I was 23. And he was the first guy who introduced me to the idea of, you can get your life together. You can actually go out and like fix your diet, work on your body. You don't have to watch the news. You can quit that. You don't have to party. You don't have to get, blind drunk every weekend, which is what I was doing literally every weekend. You can actually live your life differently from the mainstream lifestyle, and nothing's bad's going to happen to you. And honestly, if it wasn't for him, I don't know where my life would be right now.
Well, so take us back. You said you're introduced to this concept at 23.
Yeah.
So and then you said you started lifting consistently when you were 30. So talk to us about that 7-year period, because I think that might be really valuable for people who are maybe in a similar spot you were at 23.
Okay, so my mind was very, very different back then. So like I said, so in Australia, it's not like in America where you have like undergrad and you go to grad school. You have to do 5 years minimum in college. Is that correct?
In the United States?
Yes.
It's 4 years at university and 4 years in high school.
Oh, okay. So what's the earliest? How young what's the earliest age where you can get a professional job?
You could get a job at 18, but you're not likely to get a white collar job until you complete university at 22. Normally.
Oh, okay. So that's similar. So, all right. So I was 20. I was 20 when I got my first professional job, which is pretty young. And so at 23, my mind was just in a completely different place. From 23 to 28, I was just focused on advancing my corporate career. Like that was all I cared about. And because that's all I cared about, I sacrificed a lot of things. So I was overweight at that age. Okay. I showed my girlfriend the other day of how fat I was, and she couldn't believe it because I'm quite slim now. And but that's because I was binge drinking every weekend. I didn't care about anything except for the advancement of my corporate career. So the one little detail I forgot to explain there. So the guy who I met when I was 23, 24, he didn't exactly get me on the path. He just kind of like opened my mind to it, if that makes sense. So I heard his advice, but I didn't take his advice seriously. I kind of just like put it in the back of my mind, and I didn't come back to it till I was about 29, 30.
Have you spoken to him? Sorry to cut you off. Have you spoken to that guy since?
Unfortunately, we've lost touch. I know he's still in Australia, but we've lost touch. Back then it was different. We didn't have social media and stuff like that. But I'm sure if I should probably send him an email out of the blue. But yeah, I don't know I haven't spoken to him in years. But yeah, he was just, his advice basically stuck with me, but I never took action on it. For like 5-6 years, I didn't take action on it because I don't know why. I was just so focused on my corporate career and, getting that promotion, getting that bonus. I literally did not care about anything else.
And so, do you regret that today? Are you happy what you did? Like, how does your perspective on what your actions were from 23 to 28, very career focused, how do you view that today?
Man, I don't have any regrets. I mean, it's always, things are always clear in hindsight, right?
Yep.
Like, we like to always think, oh, if I could go back in time and live my life perfectly, and I would do this, and that. But the reality is, everyone's lives are imperfect. So I don't have any regrets. I see those 5, 6, 7 years. Yes, it's painful to remind myself of that time because I think, well, I could have done this differently. But at the same time, if it wasn't for that pain, I wouldn't feel the pleasure of my life today, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I wasn't suggesting that you should feel regret if it came out that way.
Oh, no, of course not. No, I understand what you mean. So yeah, that's what a huge part of the motivation on Twitter is. Like, when I'm tweeting, I often think, okay, what did I need to hear 10 years ago? Right? That's the frame of mind I'm in when I'm tweeting.
Yeah, and it's such a useful...
What did Eddie need to hear when he was 20 years old?
Yeah, it's such a useful way to operate. And Tej Dosa actually gave me the advice of just tweet, just write for yourself 3 years ago. And that has been such a helpful way of thinking that if you're in that process of growth, you can always apply. Yeah,
shout out to Tej, by the way. He's one of my favorite thinkers. Very smart man.
Absolutely. Shout out to Tej. And if you want to hear from Tej, you could check out episode 001 of this podcast. So, yes, quick plug. Always be plugging. So talk about this tweet that you have here, because I really like this tweet and I'd like to know more about it. It's, for better or worse, the future belongs to people who know how to obtain and control the attention of dopamine addicts. I thought this was such a great tweet. So my question is, what are the ways you are controlling your own dopamine addiction?
From a consumer point of view, for me?
Yeah. Not that you have a dopamine addiction, but that is just so prevalent. So what are ways you're controlling your dopamine?
So I have a little bit of an advantage, Danny. So I'm what would be considered an older millennial, which means that I had a childhood that was internet free. Okay, I wasn't on my smartphone. I was climbing trees, playing outside.
I'm jealous.
Sport. Yeah. So, and me being an older millennial, I am quite addicted to the internet. Okay, trust me. I do I'm just like everybody else. I'm vulnerable to my YouTube binges, my Twitter binges, where I just spend 2 hours reading tweets, and I'm like, where the fuck did that time go? So, and I know how powerful dopamine is from an internet addiction point of view. And so when I wrote that tweet, I was thinking about kids who are born with a smartphone, like from the time they're babies. I can't even imagine.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm so cognizant of my own addiction that I've started using an app called Freedom app.
My favorite.
And literally, oh, you use it?
Yeah, every day.
Oh, brother, we got to talk about our settings, because what I do now, I work from like, let's just say about 7 a.m. to about 3, 4 p.m. That's my working day. And 90% of that day is blocked out.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm working up to that point.
So what I do now is every hour and a half, 2 hours, I take I schedule a 15-minute break where I goof off on Twitter or I take a walk or whatever.
Yeah.
But for me to have to go out of my way to buy an app to prevent myself from using the internet, that goes to show you how much of an addict I am. And that's coming from a guy who did not grow up with the internet until he was about, 17, 18.
Yeah, man.
So I can imagine what it's like for someone who's a little bit younger, who's had the internet since he was a teenager, how addictive it must be.
Yeah, man. It's crazy because I was, I believe, 13 when I went on to Facebook for the first time, 13 when I signed up for my first Twitter account. And
whoa,
I had no idea, right? But at the same time, it's a negative from the perspective of dopamine. Have no idea what it does to my brain. We have no idea the long-term implications of social media usage. But from a positive perspective, and this is what I tell parents who are worried about their own children on social media now, I gained skills that allowed me to create this Twitter account, that allowed me to create this website that I have, and allowed me to create this podcast because I was familiar with the internet. I understood intuitively that content was currency. I understood intuitively that, Gary Vaynerchuk does a daily wine show. I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm sure, but did you know that when he was in 2009 and 2010, I was following his wine show every day because his daily wine show, it's like, I knew that was the future. I couldn't put that into words 15 years ago or 12 years ago, whatever it was. But the point is that I had an understanding of it that led me to create what I'm creating today. And so it is a negative, but it's also can be a positive as well.
Yeah, so we've spoke about the negative from a consumer point of view. So from a producer point of view, like you said, it's a very positive thing. So here's how I see it, Danny. Like, you have a certain amount of attention you can give, right? Now, you could spend that time simping out on OnlyFans, watching pornography all day, and there are a lot of people that do that, which is really depressing.
Yeah. Or
you could spend that time connecting with someone who's got their shit together and learn a few things from that person, and then go out and fix your own life, right? The way I see it is this: the internet's not going anywhere. Okay, we're going to be spending more and more and more time online, and so if you're going to spend time online, wouldn't you want to spend that time being productive and helping you improve your level of happiness and your lifestyle?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer from where we're sitting, right? Because we've been doing it. And we're loving the process of doing it, but taking that leap is difficult for people because it's like, what will people think of me? Why am I like? It's so interesting because you have to kind of separate yourself from the people you're around or not care about their opinions, and that's very difficult when you are focused and caring about their opinions. And I get that. I created a Twitter account in 2018 called Danny Roars, right? And that was the basis for my current Twitter account. And the reason for that is because I was a little bit hesitant to share my real self. Now I'm completely happy with who I am. And so I have no problem saying, hey, I'm Danny Miranda. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. You don't like it? Great. You like, it doesn't matter to me because I love myself. But when you don't love yourself, it's very easy to want to hide yourself or hide who you are in some way. And it's why I respect you so much for what you're doing and going from the anonymous Twitter account to Eddy Quan, like that takes balls to do, to step into the arena and to own your thoughts. And so, yeah, man, I just went in 17 different directions, but I'm sure you could make some semblance of what it all means.
Yeah, I hear you. What you mean, dude? I think because of like most people's normal upbringings, you're brought up in a social environment.
Hmm.
So when you're in primary school, it's your classmates, and it's the same in high school. And then you go to university, then your network expands, and then you go to your workplace. And most people live within the parameters of their little social group. That's like their little world,
Hmm.
right? And so when you your media accounts, at least in your personal name, that's um, you bring that tribe along with you. And so it's kind of like it's like mentally stripping naked in front of your friends,
Yep, absolutely.
right? That's what it feels like. Um, but it's really just it just I think it's just another example um, of how you're programmed, right? You're programmed to think that way. You're programmed to go with the consensus of your group, of your social circle, of your society, of your countrymen.
Hmm.
And so when you start to go off on your own personal hero journey, um, you're naturally going to sense that resistance from the people in your life because we're tribalistic creatures, right? We're social groups. So, um, yeah, to break free from that group and to a certain extent, it's not as easy as people make it out to be. So it takes courage for sure.
It's evolutionarily wired into us, right? Where it's just like
Yeah,
we have to be a part of the tribe, and if you're doing something that's quote unquote abnormal, if you're posting who you are on Twitter and you're repping it and saying this is who I am, it's probably gonna lead people to be like, what is going on with this person? Are they're not part
yeah,
of the tribe anymore? They're not doing the same thing I'm doing, which is not producing. Like, and so it almost makes someone else like question, oh, am I doing the right thing? Or and then that leads someone to maybe make fun of you or to say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, or talk behind your back. And what you realize after doing it, what I realized after doing it for long enough is like, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters except
yeah,
your own mind, except what you're trying to achieve. What's your intent? My intent with this podcast is to just send love to every person listening, right? And so I have that
yeah,
intent. And so I know that I just want you to be better. You're listening, I want you to be better. And I believe
yeah,
this podcast can make you 1% better. So that makes it really easy for me to just say, okay, this is out there, world. Like, check it out. I don't care if you like it or not. It won't impact my day if you hate it, right? So that's kind of
yeah.
how I think about it.
This might be a little bit too woo-woo spiritual for your audience, but really it's
No,
about
go
putting
there, my
positive.
man.
Yeah, it's about putting positive energy out there, man. Um, I'm a big believer in karma. Even if you think it's bullshit, I don't see any downsides to believing in karma because it just incentivizes people to behave well.
Hmm.
So, like you said with the podcast, if you're putting your energy out there, you're connecting with like-minded people, you're sending positive energy into the universe, and that's going to come right back to you and to the people around you.
Hmm.
Um, and the cool thing about the internet is there's so many different ways you can do that now. You're obviously someone who enjoys speaking to people, so you're doing this podcast, which is fantastic. Uh, I, you know, I like to write, which is why I started with Twitter and an email list. But soon, hopefully, I'll start my own podcast and YouTube. And it's just about slowly getting our energy out into the universe, man.
Hmm. I couldn't I couldn't agree more. And before I let you go, Eddie, I wanted to talk to
Yeah.
you about your Twitter handle because it's probably my favorite Twitter handle out in the Twitterverse, and it's War on Weakness. And for
Yes.
anyone who's not following, you should go follow this man because not only does he have the greatest Twitter handle, he's got incredible tweets. So, how did you come up with War on Weakness?
So I wanted to come up with a name that encapsulates my perspective on life. And I've long thought about this for a few years now, where I think the life is basically, it's a series of challenges that never end. So I think a lot of people make this mistake of thinking, oh, once I get to that place called happiness, I could just fucking just give up on life and just chill out, and that's it. And my life is set, right? I have a friend, one of my best friends from school is like this. He's a very, very successful vet. He has his own veterinary practice in Australia. And the first thing, ever since I've known him, his dream has always just been to get married, have a big house, have a nice car, have a nice kid, and he can just be a lazy prick for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. And the guy, whenever I hang out with him, he's always agitated, he's always angry about something, and I'm like, well, your external life seems to be fine. You've got the house, you've got the car, you've got the kids, you've got the wife. Like, what are you complaining about? Mm-hmm. And what I realized, comparing his life with and to people around me and myself, is that, happiness isn't like some constant thing. It's a daily practice. It's a daily practice of fighting with your inner demon, which I call weakness. Joe Rogan calls this his inner bitch. What do you want to call it? Weakness, your inner demons, your inner bitch, whatever. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone has something that's pushing them on the inside, a weakness, a struggle, an inner bitch, whatever it is. And life is just a daily practice of waking up and facing that inner demon every day. And so war and weakness, wars never end, and weakness is never going to go away. And aside from that, I just thought it sounded cool.
Dude,
it sounded cool, but it encapsulates how I view my life.
Mm-hmm. I love it so much, and that explanation just is so true. And quick story is in 2018, I was just super, super excited to finally move out of my parents' house. And when I did, I was going to move to San Diego, and I did move to San Diego, and I thought I was going to be, happy, and I'll have made it once I moved out of my parents' house, and everything will be good and life will be easy. And that's what I wanted, just life to be easy. But,
yes.
It took me a period of depression, and it took me a period of real deep introspection to realize the grind isn't going anywhere, and you don't want it to go anywhere. And in fact, you want it to always be there. The grind is what makes you. And so for anyone listening, take the grind and look it in its face and stare it down and get to work. Eddy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Tell everyone where they could find you on the internet.
All right. Easiest way to connect with me is just on Twitter, man. At War on Weakness. That's exactly how it's spelled. Reach out to me. Send me a DM. Give me a follow. Tweet at me, and I will get back to you.
Awesome. And you guys should definitely check this man out. Thank you so much for the time, Eddy. And I had such a great conversation today, and so grateful for you to be on this podcast. Truly.
Thanks for inviting me on, man. I feel energy's lifted. I'm ready to go on my day, man. I'm feeling great.
Awesome. Well, it was such a pleasure, and hopefully we'll have to do this sometime again soon.
Fuck yeah. All right, let's talk soon, brother.
That was my conversation with Eddy Quan. If you enjoyed this conversation, you'll probably also enjoy a newsletter that I send out every week, Tuesday Treasure, and just the coolest, most interesting things I find every week. You could find that at DannyMiranda.com/Tuesday. Thank you all for listening until the final seconds. I appreciate you wholeheartedly, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to listen until the final seconds. I'll see you guys in the next one.